What's up, everybody? It's Austin J here, or hallucinodream if you know it from the gaming community. Before we start this episode, I just wanted to let you know that once again we have recorded this podcast episode from our mobile stream setup, and I apologize for the lesser quality than our normal setup would give us. So, with that, here's the episode, and I hope you enjoy it.
What's up, everybody? And here on Game On Improve Your Health. Okay.
That was very close. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Game On Improve Your Health podcast. My name is Austin J, or hallucinodream if you know it from the gaming community. And joining me today, which she didn't last week, of course, because she didn't want to. That's what she said. And she said, I'm going to make up to it by doing the introduction. Very poorly. You can tell she didn't practice. Is my lovely wife and co-host, Christina.
Thank you. It's harder than it looks. I thought it was easy. It's definitely harder than it looks.
I'm an introduction professional. And today we are doing episode 23, follow-up and question and answer to episode 22. Surprising. Which was, we went over, and by we I mean me, went over fear and how fear affects decisions, progress, and everything of the sort. So if you didn't tune into that, go ahead and tune in. And we're going to go over any questions that may have come in and, go over... Christina listened to the episode she said, so we'll see if she did her homework, and she's going to go over what she wants to. We're probably going to open with that because I'm interested to hear what she has to say, and then I'm going to, add on to that. So let's jump right into the follow-up part.
Perfect. All right, so, after listening to the episode, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, which is surprising. I feel like you didn't touch on the biggest, reason, and I didn't listen to the last 5 minutes, so sorry if you did cover it in the last 5 minutes, but
we'll see.
He's going to tell me that you did no matter what. Fear of just failing, right? That's, to me, the biggest thing people, let fear, take over is just the simple fear of failing, especially when it comes to
Before you
fitness.
go any further, I'm going to cut you off. Before you go any further, I knew there was something I needed to cover last week, and I couldn't for the life of me remember while I was recording, and that was it. It was failure. Although all of what I touched on basically is, it ties into fear of failing, right?
Yeah.
Well, sort of, to an extent. But yeah.
Which is funny because I feel like you failed at pretty much everything your whole life.
It's not an exaggeration.
So it's funny that you didn't touch on that. But yeah, just the simple fear.
It's not failure. I transitioned into other things.
Of failing, is that you don't want to try something new because you're afraid that you're not going to be good at it. You don't want to start a fitness routine because you're afraid that you're going to quit. So, those are, huge factors that make people never want to start something. Fear of, moving into a new career. You might be afraid that you're not
starting college, maybe.
Right. Because you, are afraid that you're not going to be able to do it, that you're going to either quit because you want to and you aren't motivated anymore, or because you just aren't good enough. So just the fear of failing.
Are you sure I didn't touch on failure? I didn't say failure one time.
No.
I'm going to go back and check.
Yeah, I don't think you said failure not one time.
That's very awkward. I knew there was something.
Yeah.
If you listened to last week's episode, you would know that I did that when I was incredibly tired. I could barely even... I'd be shocked if anybody listened to the whole thing. My wife didn't even do it, so... So you probably just heard me talking, saw she wasn't there, and you're probably like, I don't know if it listens. Failure is definitely what I wanted to touch on. I couldn't remember, I'm telling you. And that's a huge one. Failure to just start and do anything. That's what I wanted to say too, because I knew it tied into One Punch. Fear of failure. One of the reasons I didn't want to get started, One Punch, which if you follow along and you know us or know me, we have the podcast right now, and everything else is in the works, right? Working on, my scheduling is very poor. If you know me, which maybe you don't know me that well, my scheduling is awful. Okay, no comment from Christina. Keep it on the back burner, and we're working on that. But I knew that going in, and I knew that all my ducks were not in a row. So I kept pushing it back. And the wife here, which is sort of how she conned herself into being my co-host, said, you know, you're never going to get started. So this is what you're going to do. You're going to start here in October, right? She gave me a couple months heads up too, right? And I almost didn't even make the deadline, which is crazy. She said, you're going to start in October, right? And that's it. You don't have a choice. So we're setting a day that you're starting the podcast. You start with the podcast. You can go from there, but at least you'll have the podcast out. And, make sure that your website and social media is up and running, which it is, right? So that is, I wasn't going to start because of fear of not everything being in line, even though I know, and I've heard several times, that you can't let fear, which is why I'm talking about it, right? You can't let fear dictate your decisions. Fear will prevent you from moving forward. And a lot of these people who have big companies, a lot of these companies, they started out very large scale companies. They started out with not all of their ducks in a row, right? They started out, they did what they needed to do to get started, and then they figured out whatever else they needed to do, and then they got it done, right? And, but if they didn't get started, that would have never happened. So you can't let fear prevent you from, doing the things that you want to do, especially passions.
Well, before we get into passion is a trigger word for me, so soon we won't get into passion just yet. But yeah, feel fear of failure, so failing. But then also, I think what you touched on even more was perfection, right? So fear that it's not going to be perfect tends to stop a lot of people from doing things. So but in business especially, if I always waited for something to be perfect, it would never get done. So sometimes it's more important just to start something and continue to work on it than something that's never gotten done at all. So think of it from like a customer perspective, right? So like you're a business owner and you have customers, like, well, am I going to not answer the phone call because I don't have the perfect thing to say when they answer, or should I just answer the phone and the customer on the other end is probably just happy that I answered, So you have to think about it from a perspective of sometimes something is better than nothing. So
something is definitely better than nothing.
Yep.
But yeah. That was what I wanted to touch on. I'm glad you touched on that. Failure is very large, but there's So and then that could go into your fitness routine, right? Mm-hmm. Fear of failure in regards to maybe you don't think you're going to be able to make the progress.
Yep.
Right. Or you're going to fail to meet the demands of something that a personal trainer might. Maybe you talk to a personal trainer, but you don't want to go through with it because you feel that maybe you're going to fail at pleasing that personal trainer, which isn't a thing, by the way. If the personal trainer, let's just go about that for a second. If you go into a fitness routine and you don't know where to start, so you talk to a personal trainer, and the personal trainer gives you an example of what they might, look for or might give you as a routine, and you think in your mind that I might not be able to do that, and you let it prevent you from doing that, that shouldn't happen. They can change anything, right? They do that. It's an example. Anything can be changed. They're expecting you to need to change with the program, right? So you're going to start somewhere. If you can't, especially if you haven't done anything before, they're going to go through everything with you that they can to try to find out your whole background, to try to, tailor it to you as best as possible. But there's always going to need to be changes, right? But if you let fear stop you from that, out of fear that you're going to fail, on the first round, not even be able to, complete that, you don't want to do that, you don't want the personal trainer to see you or whatever the reason may be, then you wouldn't even get started.
Them, you know? So like if you're
started.
Right. So, like, if you're afraid to let them down or disappoint them, that, or just embarrass yourself. I mean, I know that you touched on that. Just was like, fear of embarrassment, of being judged. And this definitely happens for men too, but obviously from a woman, I see it that a lot of the fear comes from not living up to those, like, expectations that you've, like, even set for yourself. So like fear of like, well, even if I do work out, am I gonna look like that model? Am I gonna look like what I picture in my head? So fear of not being able to achieve those goals, physically or mentally. So that's always a big one for me.
Yeah, and you definitely shouldn't outside what's the word I'm looking for? Influences, yeah. That's the word. Mm-hmm. Outside influences shouldn't influence your decision and shouldn't, affect or increase your fear to start or do something, right? Because if you want to do it if you want to or need to do it, mm-hmm. and that's something that health and wellness or any other route, and that's something you want to do, you should be doing it because you want to do it, right? And you really shouldn't sorry about the squeaky chair, shouldn't let fear drive your decisions to not pursue it, mm-hmm. Just because of, outside influences or what somebody else is going to think about, you pursuing that, or what happens if you fail. Let's just put in a statistic. I don't know the statistic, so I'm using that word. Let's put in a realistic. Hold on. Let's put in a realistic statement here. It's not a statistic. Sorry. This is a realistic statement.
Let me use a statistic. I don't have one, but we're gonna use one.
Statistically speaking, okay. I'm gonna start with the statistic, and then I'm gonna get into a realistic statement. What's real? Okay. Statistically speaking, I don't actually have this statistic or a source that it came from. Now, what's realistic is that every single person in the world fails hundreds and hundreds of times in their lives, and hundreds might even be an understatement, right? Without failure, you don't learn, okay? You can't learn, because if everything was perfect, you would be it would just be a straight and narrow. You don't have to learn anything because you never failed. Failure is a part of life, okay? So letting fear drive you because of failure just shouldn't be a thing.
Yep. And it also just holds you back. So we had our daughter just about a year ago, and yeah, I know. I travel.
Just kidding, we did.
I used to travel a lot for work, and then I had a baby in the pandemic, so I didn't travel for quite some time, and I had to take my first trip, and it was really scary. I had so many thoughts of, I don't want to leave her. I don't want to travel by myself. Is she going to be mad at me? Mind you, she's like 6 months old, so she doesn't give a crap. She was like, wow, Mom, that was a really long work day. If she even noticed I was gone.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Daddy's too fun.
So, fear can just hold you back. And I had to do it, and it was really hard at the time, but I knew that as soon as I got on that plane, I would be fine. And so I got on the plane, and then I totally forgot about them for 2 days. Mm-hmm. And it was really, really nice. And then
feeling was mutual. Yeah. We forgot about you too.
Yeah. But if I didn't go on that trip, it was always going to be scary. It was always like my fears were always going to be there, but when I got back, she smiled at me just like she did when I left. She kissed me just like she did when I left, and she had no idea, and my husband was still there too. So I guess that's a plus. So nothing bad happened, right? But if I didn't do it, then it was always going to be that one trip, right? Like the fear was just going to keep going. So you have to just do it. And if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing and you're not really doing what you're supposed to be doing. So if you're always comfortable, if you're always just sitting, then you're not really living up to your full potential. So, growth is uncomfortable. It's not supposed to be comfortable. So just making sure that you can rationally think about these things, right? So like I had to sit down and rationally think, my daughter's 6 months old. She's not going to notice I left. My husband's with her. She's fine, right? So like everything is fine. So just do it. And if it's not that, if it's another career choice, right? Like you're leaving to go to another job, that's always going to be scary. It's supposed to be scary. New opportunities are scary. But if you rationally think of like, okay, well, why am I doing this? And all of these things align with your larger goal, then it really shouldn't be that scary anymore. And you know what? Then if you don't like it or if it doesn't work out, you start something new.
Yeah, going along with the career situation, you can think about it rationally too, whereas you're in a position you're in right now, right? You got to that position somehow. You probably are, just coasting through the motions because you know how to do everything, right? Unless you've been there for a couple of days and then you're changing. But I'm talking about somebody who has been there for a while.
Yeah.
And everybody and everything's okay, right? That you'll get to that point again when you change careers, right? That was, both those things I touched on in the first episode by myself.
Yep.
I was scared to do the obstacle course races, but one of the tactics I used was to bring somebody with me, which was first my friend.
Just make all of your favorite employees quit with you, and just keep bringing them.
Yeah, bring your friends with you. Don't do that. We don't condone that kind of.
No, do not do that.
Being as I'm not a business owner like you, if you want to do that, go ahead. But you can't say that. You'll get in trouble. Man and a boo boo. Anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't have started the Spartan race without, bringing a friend. Now, this is different in the career move.
He calls me a friend.
OCR racing, because I brought a friend, and then, well, technically you were a friend at that time, so get out of here. Yeah,
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it was like 3 months into knowing you. You were just a friend.
What? You are so full of shit. We're getting a divorce.
Awkward. We were dating for like a month, but whatever. Anyways, I asked you to join me there before we became official.
Oh my God.
Yeah, remember?
You would not leave me alone. I cannot even believe.
This is a topic for another day. See, she's talking out of fear right now.
Yeah.
Anyways, what I did was I knew I would do it if I brought somebody, right? If I brought somebody, whether it was a friend or a significant other or my cat.
Significant nothing. We're getting
or my cat.
Divorce.
Goodbye.
Yeah, and he took my cat probably already at this point. So, you can take my cat, but I'm just a friend.
She's my cat.
Oh my
Anyways,
God.
This took a turn.
Seriously.
And
you're going to be going to bed fearful tonight.
Bye. And in regards to the career, I didn't bring a friend on the career. I didn't seek out employees that were looking for different employment options. But I knew it was going to be scary, and even though I didn't want to do it for the longest time, I still did it. And I don't regret the decision whatsoever, right? So I got past the fear. It was uncomfortable. Even though I didn't want to make the transition, I did, and then it ended up being fine, just like I thought it was going to be, right? So
Yep.
I did talk about a couple of those examples.
Yeah. Even fear of getting married, having kids, a lot of like the common fears in that. It's like, well, I'm not in the career that I want to be in. I don't have enough money. I don't have the perfect living situation. There's always going to be something, but it's never the right time. You're never prepared. It's always scary. Do you think we knew what to do with a baby? No, we didn't. But you just figure it out and you just do what you have to do. So, not that we had to, we chose to have a baby. But once you decide, there's really there's no turning back for most people. So, fear is always going to be there, no matter what big decision it is, whether it's a career, a personal life, fitness, but it's just something that you have to just think about rationally and overcome, and talking to people. So sharing your fears, sharing, what your goals are, and just like fitness, I know we've covered it before, but just really always remembering what your goals are, right? So how does this get me to my end goal? What does this, if I make this decision now, how does it help me get to my end goal? Has always helped me really overcome any fears or obstacles that I've had.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all. Just get a yeah. All right.
Perfect.
You also mentioned passion.
Totally stoned out and fell asleep right there for a second. So I was thinking about I wanted to say something, and I totally,
He's just so worried that I'm actually gonna file for a divorce. He can't think of anything else.
I don't know who you're gonna try to divorce. Yeah, I did talk about passion.
Yeah. You and I definitely have different views on passion. I don't believe that everybody should follow their passion. I don't. I think that so I work in an industry that growing up, I did not think that I was, going to love and that I was going to work in. But
well, let's stop for a second. Before we go any further, when I said something about passion earlier, I wasn't specifically talking about your career choice, your passion that you want to pursue in a career.
Well, I do feel like
I'm passionate about Spartan races.
Yeah.
I just want to race in Spartan races.
Okay.
I'm passionate about butterflies. I'm not going to go be a butterfly.
Well, he's tried.
I am a butterfly. Anyways, but that's beside the point.
But yeah, so anyway, well,
I was not specifically talking about, but now that she's talking about it, yeah, go ahead. Does this relate to fear?
No, this is just a pure disclaimer that you should just not always follow your passion when it comes to your career. Do you know what you become passionate about? You become passionate about your career when it allows you to do everything that you want to do, right? So, like, I would rather have a career that, and everybody's different, and I get that, but everybody's that's telling you to follow your passion, do what you love, blah, 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 is probably already rich or has a lot of money, right? So if you really enjoy going on vacation and you really enjoy buying nice things, then you probably shouldn't work somewhere that pays you minimum wage just because you like it, right? So just things to keep in mind. Yes, there are personal passions for sure, and you can follow those. Like, there are hobbies. You can follow, you can do Spartan races. You can do arts and crafts because you love them. But, don't, if you're fearful that you're going to quit your high-paying job to do arts and crafts and sell them on the street, I don't know if that's a passion I would follow. That I would be fearful of, and you have every right to be fearful of that.
I'm glad you got that off your chest. Yeah. And it was only a matter of time before that specific conversation and thought came up on the podcast. And for those listening, thank you for listening about the career and passion. Okay, and just like she said, everybody's thoughts on that is different.
For sure. Yep.
But that's not really what I was talking about. I was talking about passion. Okay.
Yeah.
I was really talking about passion about activities, hobbies.
Okay.
Possibly pursuing a passion in college, right? Because you don't know what these people's passions are, right?
That's true.
Maybe they are passionate that they want to be a lawyer. Lawyers make a lot of money, but they don't. They're afraid to go to school because school's going to take a long time, right?
For sure. Yeah.
But if that's the only thing, that shouldn't hold you back.
No.
School's going to take a long time, but it'll eventually lead you to where you want to be.
Yep.
And what you're passionate about. And I've said this before. I've said this specifically about college. If you go to college, this happens to millions of people. If you go to college and you're passionate about something, you're going to college for whatever it is you're passionate about, and 2 years in, really realize this really actually isn't for me,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the end of the world, okay? You can always change. You might lose a couple of your credit classes or credit courses that you took, but in hindsight, that's really not terrible as it would be if you continued to pursue that college, and then you just never, you finished it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just, because you hated it so much, you never even used the degree, right?
Yeah.
So
No, for sure. And, when I was in high school, I was convinced I was going to be a music teacher, and that's what I wanted to go to school for. And then I realized that it was something that I was passionate about, and when it became a job, so the idea of having to do it every day, the idea of being measured on it for success, like it made it less fun, right? So I lost my passion for something when it became a job. So, that's definitely a possibility for sure. So, yeah, I get it. And not everybody is money driven, and, you might want to just follow your passion and don't let fear get in the way.
let's put the financial situation aside and fear.
Yep.
Not good. So,
what else?
well, we'll go into the questions now, right? Unless you're done.
Yeah, I'm done.
There was
I'm
one.
done my
There was
rant.
one question. We're not going to be too much longer on this episode, but there was one question, and we've already touched on it several different times. And in this episode, I might have in the first episode, the question that came in was, when you want to pursue something, or start a fitness routine, anything in life, and you get struck by fear, what are some tactics to get past that, right? To get through the fear to be able to end up on the other side.
Yep.
And we've touched on it a bunch of different times, is that you just have to think about things realistically, right? In a realistic approach. So like just a career example for when I changed careers, and I've talked about this episode and the last episode, is that I knew it was going to be scary going in. I knew it was going to be scary learning a bunch of new stuff. And I knew the temporary pay cut I was going to take was going to be scary, right? Mm-hmm. The temporary pay cut being very minimal. So it was a new career, new place, new learning, everything. But realistically, after I knew I was going to stay in that career for quite some time, so just like I ended up, I thought about it realistically, just like I ended up in every other job that I've had, where I, met everybody, learned what I needed to, then it eventually just became, second nature, where I was able to do the job without even thinking about it, right? That I knew that's what was going to be, even though the trade is really not something it's not second nature. So it's always changing. So, but I knew that it wasn't going to be a struggle the whole time, right? And I knew it was something that I actually wanted to do. So it wasn't like I was, doing all that, and I was gonna just be, fearing that I'm going to hate it the whole time, because I knew I was going to like it. And in the back of my mind, I also knew that once I get into that, if I really don't like it, I can stay in that for a while I search for another job, right? Yeah. So, which would give me an even better background, because it was an upgrade of a job. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, yeah, so I think just tactically, so thinking about things realistically, so like, what does that mean, right? So, maybe like write things down. So, I try to always have my goals in mind. So write criterias to meet that goal. So say you want to be a lawyer, right? And you're afraid to go to law school because it's going to take too long. Maybe you're worried about financial aid, whatever it is. So write down things like, well, what is the criteria in order for me to reach my goal? Well, to be a lawyer, you gotta go to law school. So that's number one. That's a huge criteria, right? And then some other things like, well, I have to be able to do, I have to be able to have critical writing skills or thinking skills or whatever it might be. So just try to like write down what the criteria is. Maybe, like what what your goals are once you get to that position. And then, and then you start working backwards. So then, you start with the end in mind, and then you work yourself backwards. So, okay, well, if I want to get to here, then I'm going to have this type of job, or I'm going to have this type of experience. And so then looking at the opportunity that's in front of you, asking, well, does it check any of those boxes? Does it give me the opportunity to check a certain criteria off of my list to get to the end result? And then if the answer is yes, well, then you're never going to make the wrong decision, because even if that's not where you stay for the remainder of your path, it's still checked off a box. It's still checked off some criteria. So making a list, making sure that you have your goals, and then just work yourself backwards.
Yeah, writing things down is definitely a powerful tool in regards to quite a bit of different aspects of life. You can write down that, and a pro and con list would actually be all right too. Pros being you'll become a lawyer, right? You'll be able to pursue that passion, and then one of the cons would be the length of the school. Right. But you can say, do the pros outweigh the cons? Mm-hmm. And if you have a significant amount more cons than you do pros, maybe you're not as passionate about that.
Right, or it's just not the right time.
Or it's just not the right time, right?
So then maybe you just put it on the back burner for a little bit, So, I would just, it doesn't mean that you're never going to be able to do it or that it's never going to work out, but maybe it's just not the right move for you at that time. And that's okay. But you got over the fear of doing it because you're rationally, you didn't do it because you were fearful of doing it. You didn't do it because it wasn't the best move. So career-wise, personal life, fitness, anything like that, it just wasn't the right move at that time. So
yep, that was the only question we had. And we touched on it, and we touched on it in the episode. So with that, we're going to wrap up this episode.
I know, this was a long one.
Well, we lollygagged for a little bit at the beginning, which you guys won't really know about unless you watch.
We should do bloopers.
Yeah, unless you see our Instagram, which is what I was about to say, which we're going to post. And by we, I mean me. I'm going to sneak in some awesome bloopers. Anyways, thank you for tuning in. That was episode 23 on fear. Question and follow-up. If you have any more questions, by all means, you can send them to any of our social media or the website over here on your left if you're watching. If you're listening on the podcast platforms, correct. You did your left, right, cool. And you're even pointing to the right. You really did that well. Or did you not do that well and just worked out for you?
It just worked out for me.
And if you're listening on the podcast platform, all the links will be in the description. You can ask us anywhere there. You can ask me personally on any of my social media. That's hallucinodream, and that will be in the description as well. Christina, you can't ask, but she'll answer. And next week, April 21st, at 7:30, we're actually going to be back at 7:30 on a schedule. We're back. Me personally, I will be back. Christina here might be hit or miss depending on her schedule. 7:30 p.m. Eastern every single Wednesday once again. And be back with another episode. So thanks for those who have tuned in and those who are listening on the podcast platform. And we hope to see you guys next week.
Bye.